So we're going to get started as people keep coming on. Ellen was not feeling well tonight, so she was going to listen in.
Hey, Jeff.
Hang on.
You're going to mute us?
Sounds like a plan to me.
I'm going to go ahead and do that. And Rabbi, if you, I'm going to mute everybody. So if you want to unmute, let me make you a co-host. Okay, so we can do that. All right, so welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to be talking about tzedakah, and we have a wonderful guest teacher this evening, Rabbi Stephanie Ruskay, and I sent her bio out, but she's the, if I can find it here, Associate Dean of the Rabbinical School at JTS, and the Executive Director of the Hendel Center for Ethics and Justice. So a great teacher for our topic tonight. So I'm going to mute everyone, and then we'll start with our opening prayer like normal, and then I'll turn it over to the rabbi. Okay, Rabbi, would you lead us in the prayer?
Sure. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, Lord our God, whose commandments and add holiness to our life, and who gave us the commandment to study words of Torah. Nice to be together, everybody.
Thank you. So I will turn it over to you. Just let me know when you want to do breakout rooms, and I'll set those up too.
Hey, hi everybody. It is so nice to be together. I, first of all, am extremely moved by the fact that you have used this time to decide that now a global pandemic would be the perfect time to have a bat mitzvah and to study together with this group of women across the country. I think I hope that we will have a combination of small and big group conversations today, and do some chavruta, some talking. I'll try to toggle between the screens. If you want to sort of jump in and I'm not catching and I'm not noticing you, like, you know, wildly wave your hands or put up your hand, and I guess between Julia and I will figure it out. But I hope I'm not talking at you the whole night. So I am the Associate Dean in the JTS Rabbinical School, and I also lead our Hendel Center for Ethics and Justice. And I've been at JTS for 6 years and really came there with the idea of making social justice more a part of the education of rabbis, cantors, educators, and Jewish lay leaders who are being trained there. Are any of you alumni of JTS? You could put your hand up if you are, or no, not yet. Okay, so tonight, you know, I guess I'll give you a little bio just so you know, like, why the heck am I the person talking about this topic? Not that this topic isn't for everybody, because if you're Jewish, and my whole premise is sort of like how we live Jewish life involves doing acts of gemilut chasadim and acts of tzedakah as part of religious life. So I grew up in Mahopac, New York. It's about an hour north of New York City in Putnam County. And we went to the only synagogue in town, which was conservative. And we didn't really, it was a very important part of our sort of family life. We spent a ton of time there. We led davening. We were like part of the life of the shul, and nobody really ever talked about social justice as part of our Jewish identities. We talked about Shabbat, we talked about holidays, kashrut, but it really felt to me like that part was missing. I felt like, you know, if this was like a roadmap for how you live your life, and you know when to pray and what blessings to say when you eat, like, why isn't there sort of some sort of talk about taking care of the poor. And I think that was really my own particular shul that wasn't focusing on it, but it has sort of led me on this path of making sure that it was elevated into like sort of a major piece of how we observe. And so I went to college at JTS in Columbia. I felt like I wanted to get a good Jewish education, but it wasn't where I thought I was gonna do my work. I thought I would do something different. And I went to Bulgaria for a year for the Joint Distribution Committee when I finished college. And I would say, and then my father died right before I went to Bulgaria. So I sort of came back and was figuring out where the heck was I gonna land myself. And I wound up getting a job at American Jewish World Service. And the reason I sort of told you all that part of the story is because this was 1998, and it was a time I started the day after Hurricane Mitch. And I then spent my entire first day of work faxing people, if you remember fax machines. We had an early one, and you had to get the 2 pages like back to back. And I faxed like every news outlet to tell them that we were collecting money for Hurricane Mitch through the Jewish community. And that became a place that really educated me. I would say it was a moment in time when a lot of Jews were sort of rethinking what's an obligation to help Jews in need, what's an obligation that's informed by text to help non-Jewish people who are in need. And it was like, and for me, it was a moment where I was sort of resetting my understanding of Jewish identity, which had largely been about ritual, but the justice and service part felt very separate. Now, like this job gave me the opportunity to be in relationship with lots of Jews who were trying to figure it out. And we led delegations to El Salvador, Nicaragua, Mexico of college students. And I sort of I remember those early trips where like we said, well, there must be something Jewish about this. Let's find a bunch of sources. And we just sort of handed them out and was like vomiting all these texts on them. And then we thought like, oh, for the next trip, maybe we should write some questions so they can talk about it. And we kept refining them. And I would say in lots of ways, those texts became a big part of me and have really shaped my own Jewish identity. And they're ones that I teach a lot. So when I was like looking at my source sheet again to come tonight, I was like, oh, I just love that text. Oh, I just love that text. So it's a little long, the source sheet packet that I sent you. And I don't have any imagination that we're going to get through all of it, but we'll do some of them. And I hope some of them I will talk about, even if we don't look at them in depth, and you'll think later, oh, I want to go back and look at that one. My email address is also on it. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation, I am accessible. A couple of other things, I guess, just to tell you some of the work we do at the Handel Center, because it will give you a little bit of a sense of where I'm coming from and approaching the text now. So I would say prior to COVID, we were thinking like, you got to do justice work in the building, you got to do justice work in the community, you got to do justice work out in the Jewish community, sort of larger. And when COVID hit, our community really, just like people were all over the place, like every community. And it felt like, well, we probably can't do justice work in the neighborhood right now. We had done a big like standing up for justice and religious tolerance march at the beginning, like right in 2016, around the time of the Muslim ban. And we decided at that time, like we needed to sort of show some sort of different way of standing up for religious values in the community to ourselves, not only to other people. And so we had a multi-faith press conference on the steps of JTS. We marched around the neighborhood with all of the different organizations and religious houses of worship and civic engagement organizations that had decided to do this together. And it was amazing. And then we went into lockdown, not like, 4 years later as we were building on that. And so during COVID, like it was very clear that that people of color were disproportionately experiencing sort of all of the effects of COVID, and also, and George Floyd was murdered. And so we really shifted a lot of our racial justice work and aspirations to the movement. And so things that we've been working on in the last year, we are working with USY, United Synagogue Youth, our youth movement, to start, and we have launched a Jews of Color cohort. And the idea is that kids of color, Indigenous Sephardi Mizrahi, who want to be part of USY, haven't found their way in, are in USY, but feel like, hey, how come I'm the only one in my community? And like, be nice to talk about this with people who might have some similar experiences. Are there together talking with their group leader, who is a kid who he's a man who grew up in USY. He's a Jew of color, went to day school, has lots of experience he draws on in doing this work. We also launched a Jews of Color, Indigenous Sephardi Mizrahi theater project in our new theater. So we have a new theater at JTS that we just built. And so the people who are the culture makers, the art makers, are Jews of color. And so does anybody remember from last summer, the Hanukkah, last winter, the Hanukkah puppy song? Like, does it sound familiar? It was one of the actors from Hamilton, W. Diggs, and he's a Jew of color, and he did this song about the puppy for Hanukkah. And it's like, it changed who was deciding what was the song that we were going to sing. And our hope is that this theater also will transform the culture. And so we're doing that. And I've also been teaching a community organizing class of clergy and lay leaders from around the country who want to get training in community organizing because they want to act on some of their impulses around justice and service. So I'm saying that now. I'll touch back on it at the end, but I just wanted to know, like, I wanted you to know, like, who am I? What am I doing every day? That's sort of like aligned with the kinds of things that we're going to study today. So I'm going to pause for 1 second. Are there any reactions, or did anyone want to say anything? Because I'm missing the energy of the room, even though I know that we could never be together. So this is the best.
Wow. One word, wow.
Yeah, I'm just super inspired by how everything you do is geared toward making everybody's lives better. And when everybody else's lives are better, ours are too. It's just like the whole social justice thing is really beautiful. It's what Judaism is.
Thank you. I agree. I mean, I'll tell you, yesterday in our organizing class, one of the things that we were talking about, someone raised the cost of Jewish life, of observant Jewish life, how expensive kosher food is, how expensive synagogue dues are. Like, you know, I don't need to tell you, you're all on the phone. And we were talking about how when you have a more diverse community, you start talking about different things. And the example we were focusing on was like, you know, work-life balance, like when it was more frequently men working and women at home, it was like nobody really liked working all those long hours. And like when women sort of entered the workforce in larger numbers, suddenly people were talking about like, well, maybe there's a different way to do this because you actually can't. And it's sort of, I mean, it's still a work in progress, clearly, but I think it changed the way people talked about it. And my hunch is that we have a crisis brewing around how expensive Jewish life is. And I think that having sort of diverse groups of people talking about it is going to like simultaneously have some intervention. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to be exciting. Okay, so my hope is that tonight, like what we're going to look at are texts that make the main point that really like Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness, and also tzedakah are like, both of those are kind of requirements of living an observant Jewish life, as much as any other thing that you think is like the major practice of Judaism. So does anyone want to share, like, where does your understanding of how to act for justice or do acts of service come from? Like, just to hear some other voices, like, and it could be like a Jewish text, it could be like, you know, my mom did this thing, but like when you think of an impulse to act on someone else's behalf, where does it come from for you? Marlene?
I would have to say my late father, Irving Ostro, of blessed memory. He was an attorney, but he was very active in the community. He used to give speeches. He was a part of B'nai B'rith's Speakers Bureau in the 60s and 70s. I grew up in New Jersey. And he used to talk to civic groups about how to answer the bigot. because there's always been bigotry, but I guess at that point, he worked in Newark, we lived in the suburbs, that he realized that it really didn't matter what flavor of bigotry it was. And as we as Jews know, that it's, you know, we're an other and an immigrant and have been persecuted. So I, as a young child, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer and used to watch him in the courtroom, but it was really when he was outside in the community at night and on the weekends that I think that it left a much more indelible impression on me.
Thank you.
Marion, did you want to share?
Yeah, well, my, I guess my inspiration has always been my mother, who, my father and my mother, I'm from Toronto, Canada, and they started a shul in the area. My mother came from Rochester, New York, and my father and my mother were one of the first people. And my mother always had the tzedakah box, you know, by the, and no matter who came to the door or what was happening, my mother was there to help, whether it was a neighbor, whether they were Jewish or not. She was the first one to come over with food or with stuff that people needed. So my mother, to this day, I think of her when I think of the inspiration that she gave me to do any of the things that I do and the volunteer work that I do.
Thank you. Marion, that story reminds me of one of the texts in here talks about the mother of Rav Chia, who apparently did his grocery shopping for him, but her, which that is another thing, but the story is that when she would go to the market, she would always buy whatever she bought for him, she bought an extra for somebody in need. And that was like her practice. Like, if I'm going to have it, if he's going to have it, so is anybody else who's going to be in need. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, Arlene.
Yeah, I'm like Marlene. I came from New Jersey and my father was a practicing attorney, and we never really became wealthy because what he did was he had a lot of clients, but it was that he wouldn't be charging, and we had an awful lot. I remember growing up with so many, the gefilte fish came from one family, and the layer cakes came from another family, and he was very he just really never really wanted to charge these clients. So and he got so much more in return in that way. And we also from Jersey had the same tzedakah box that my mother would have there, the blue tzedakah box, and was very generous in that regard. So
Thank you. Okay, Karen.
So I have a similar experience to what Arlene was just talking about. My parents owned a jewelry store in a small town in upstate New York. And when I was growing up, I would leave school and walk over to the store, and I would observe how they treated their customers. And I never knew it until I got older, but they would give everyone such deep discounts that they never really made any money. And so I grew up with that frame of mind, you know. They would barter for things. My father would say, well, if you can't pay for this, you know, it's okay and you don't worry about it. But they would say, well, I have this piece of jewelry, it's been in my family, and if you would like it. And my father would, you know, he would be no, 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 no. And then finally he would take it. And there were some very interesting pieces that he collected, but he never would do anything with them, you know. And my mother would talk to and a lot of the people, of course, we knew because it was a very small town. And so that's, again, how I grew up. And also the blue tzedakah box.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share a text with you just by way of framing. You don't need to look at it, but you have it so that if you want to go back and look at it, to refer to it later, you may. It's on what I called page 1 of the one that says like my name and the title on it. So, and it's a story about chavruta, really, which normally it's about study partners, and it's not usually a story you would necessarily tell. It's called source 2, what happens when you come together to study. But it's really, to me, essential, especially today, to use as a frame for talking about justice and service. So it's a story about Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who were study partners. And so,
Sorry, I was going to put the text up.
it's okay. It's very long. I think it's better for us to just see each other.
Just talk it
you
out.
Don't need
Okay.
yeah, you don't need to look at it. I'm telling it to you like a story. But
Okay.
So Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan are study partners, and Reish Lakish gets sick, and Rabbi Yochanan is like devastated, and he's crying all over the place. And the rabbis get together and say, like, well, how are we going to take care of him? What should we do? They say, well, let's send him another study partner. And so they think like, well, who should we send? Why don't we send this guy? Because he knows the most Torah, like he'll be an adequate study partner. And so they start studying again. And the new study part, the Rabbi Yochanan says something. Oh, sorry. Oh, I don't think, does someone want to mute themselves? I hear the noise, but I don't think it's me. Better? Okay. So thank you. Anyway, so Rabbi Yochanan will say something is in the Torah, and then the new Chavruta will tell him all the ways that he's right. And he'll say something, and the other Chavruta says, oh, these are all the ways that you're right. And Rabbi Yochanan loses his marbles, and he says, like, you're the worst Chavruta ever. Like my previous Chavruta, I would say something. He would tell me the 24 ways I was wrong. Then I would tell him the 24 ways that he was wrong. And then we would know that we had thoroughly explored it. But you just tell me I'm right. And in, a moment of total immodesty, he says, like, I would never have said it if I wasn't right. I know I'm right. That's why I'm saying it. And he's, sort of goes back to grieving his old chavruta. And the rabbis get together and pray for him that he should be comforted. And he dies because he can't live without a chavruta. And now he doesn't have one. And so I guess like my perspective on all of this is like, I have a lot of ideas about how you make social change, but like none of us really has the whole picture. And like, there are so many problems that like we have to be in conversation with people who don't see the world precisely how we do, and who are going to look at our ideas and say like, here are the 24 ways that you're wrong. And we're not in that place primarily in the world right now. And so, and I am just like to know, I might be the person leading this session, and I love to talk to people who agree with me just as much as anybody else. Like, but every time I teach this, it's sort of like a reminder to me that like, I shouldn't be satisfied with that. And even though sometimes it's easier, it's not going to solve any problems. So I guess I'm curious, does anybody have an example of someone who jumped to your mind, of someone who like really challenges you around how you think about how to make the world better? And what's the secret to your relationship if you have one? Because I think we're all struggling.
Ruth.
Okay,
Sorry. 2 pages.
Our ritual director, Michael Rubin, mentions the Native Canadians all the time. Like, I'm from Canada, and he makes us, feel that, we haven't done enough, and he brings it up all the time, every time we're studying with him or anything. And, like he does a Devar Torah in school, in the shul, and he'll be talking about it too. Oh.
Thank you.
I think for many of us, our children and maybe our grandchildren inspire us to do tikkun olam, not only our synagogues and our sisterhoods. I know personally, my grandson, raised money for pediatric brain cancer. And I know that Faye's grandson, who was just bar mitzvah this weekend, raised, Faye, I'll let you tell, books for the inner city schools, thousands of books. So I think that not only can we be examples for our families, but our families can be examples for us.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about my son, Akiva Gersh. He became a Baal Shuv in his early 20s, became vegan while he was in college. He's now known on the internet as the vegan rabbi. And he has, you can Google his name, and he has done a tremendous amount of things to try to inspire people to make our environment, our world, a cleaner, safer place. If people only saw the benefit of being a vegan. I'm not a vegan, but he's very inspiring. He writes for the Jerusalem Post in the blog regularly, and he's just done amazing things. He lives in Israel now, and he made Aliyah and his family. So he's been an inspiration for many.
Thank you. On the source sheet on that page 1, above it is just a piece from Pirkei Avot, which you are all modeling so well, about who's wise, one who learns from everybody. And I think, like, again, so what I told you that whole story about how I got to be here, but when I was at American Jewish World Service, it was both a very formative time of my life, but it was also the way they did grant making and social justice partnering was like, really, their approach was like, people know what they need usually. They don't necessarily have the resources to make it happen, but they know what they need. Like, don't go there and tell them anybody what they need. Like, they know. And then your job becomes, if you have access to different resources, money, people, the ability to walk into an embassy, like whatever it is, like the vote, you use it, but like they know. And that has become like sort of a key piece of how I do justice work. And I feel like I hear you all talking about your kids and them sort of going out on their paths of finding out what the people need and taking the source of wisdom everywhere. So thank you for sharing those stories. Let's look at page 19. Oh, actually, page 11, sorry. So I would love a volunteer to read, and we will do some coverage work, but I feel like there's such a nice benefit of being together. So will someone read in English? At the top of the page, there will be among you those who are needy, that paragraph.
Which source sheet is that?
Page 11.
I have it up.
All right.
There will be among you those who are needy, of your brethren within any of your gates, in your land which the Lord your God gave to you. You should not harden your heart, nor should you close your hand from your needy brother, but you shall surely open your hand unto him, and shall surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he lacks. Beware that there be not a negative thought in your heart, and you will say, the 7th year and the year of Shemitah is at hand, and your eye be evil against thy needy brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry unto the Lord against you, and it will be viewed as a sin in you. You shall surely give him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you put your hand unto, for the poor shall never cease in the land.
Thank you very much. So there's a lot there, and a lot then gets sort of explored by the rabbis. So first of all, what did that evoke for any of you, that source?
I didn't understand.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. What did it evoke for you? Like, before I start asking questions, did anyone read that and think like, whoa, like harsh, unbelievable, depressing? Like, I don't know, what did it make you feel?
That charity begins somewhat at home. I'm sorry, I'm looking away because I have it on a monitor. You need to take care of the people in your community. And it kind of reminds me, I was looking at Maimonides' ladder. You know, at the top of that, I don't know if we're talking about that later, but like at the top is sort of the anonymous donation. But if you move down a little bit, it's where the giver knows the receiver, even if the receiver doesn't know them. And to me, that is really taking care of somebody. I had a friend once who had a pretty wealthy family, and she had a friend who had fallen on hard times. Just a lot of stuff happened. And my friend took this friend in and took care of her and got her on her feet and helped her get an apartment and furnished it and a car, like everything that she needed. And I remember she was very quiet about it. And I thought what she did was extraordinary. And she said, you know, we can donate money to all kinds of causes that we believe in, and that's great. But if I can help somebody more immediate that I know what they need, and I have the means to give it to them, and they have no other way to give it, that to me is real charity. And I just thought that was really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, Arlene.
I think you need to open your eyes and your heart to being able, I mean, you have to really be able to see that these are the people that are in need, or you're not going to be able to recognize where you should or you shouldn't. And people, it's not that obvious, but you have to be able to view it or be aware of it in the first place. And also there is a part of this that says there's an evil part to this. If you don't do it, it's really looked upon very harshly if you don't. That was the other side of what was going on here that I felt.
Yeah, you're right. There are texts in here that talk about, you know, there's one Talmud story that talks about these rabbis who are on their way to the bathhouse together. And on the way, they pass this guy who's asking for money. And he says, you know, do a mitzvah, give me tzedakah. And they say to him, you know, just wait, when we come out, we'll give you some tzedakah. And they come out and he's dead. And, you know, it's like a very dramatic story. And so they say like, okay, well, we really missed the chance to give him tzedakah, but we could take care of his body. We can clean him and, you know, honor him in his death. And as they're cleaning him, they find a satchel with money around his neck. And their response is like, what would you say if like you were taking care of somebody and then you realized that actually they had been faking that they needed money and they had a lot? How would you feel? Denise.
I might react in the beginning. I might be a little bit maybe in shock that somebody would, because it would never cross my mind to do that. But ultimately, if I do something for somebody, I do it because I want to do it. I don't want anything in return. And so, and I have to live with myself at the end of the day. So whether or not they deserved it, I did it in good faith. And so that's how I would deal with it.
Thank you. Jerry Lynn, did you want to say something?
Well, Denise said everything I was going to say.
Oh, all righty. So, Jill. Wait, you're
You know,
still
it
muted.
makes me think, you know, he's carrying this money on his person and you think he doesn't have a lot. Goes back to this woman I know at my synagogue. Well, I just moved from Florida to Chicago, but who, you know, when the people that grew up during the Depression and stuff, who were afraid to spend everything, or they always had to have extra because they never knew when their next meal was coming from. They had the attitude that they had to keep, you know, these things were kept for emergency. So you really can't say that he had a lot of money. You don't know what the circumstances were or what that was for. And I guess it made me think about this woman I know who's in her 80s. She's still alive. I mean, and she's talking about her husband because he was much older than her and he grew up during the Depression and stuff, and how their mindset was very different when it came, even though they got, you know, they were successful in their careers and stuff later on, but he was a child of the Depression, and you never know what people's mindset or their thinking or what this was for. So I guess.
Thank you. Also with the rabbis. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say Sabina's hand's been up.
Oh, go ahead, Sabina. I'm sorry. Oh, right. Your virtual hand.
Your virtual hand.
Oh, she's not talking, or you are?
I'm on my iPad tonight. That was a mistake.
Sorry.
It's okay. So the rabbis said, like, thank God for imposters, because they understood that had somebody asked them for money and they didn't give it, that they would, like, God would hear them and take out God's wrath on them. And like, they would have sinned beyond belief and be punished. And so they would much rather somebody be an imposter than that they would have actually like ignored somebody in front of them who was needy, which is like sort of different than lots of people today think about people who might be, pretending to need something they don't need. So, okay, so let's look at the bottom part, which is a commentary. So this is Rabbi Yeshua Lalum, who was an Algerian rabbi who wrote a commentary. So he looked at this piece of Torah and said, it's kind of interesting. It says, don't harden your heart or close your hand. Why do you need to tell us both? It seems kind of redundant. Let's talk about it. So he has a comment, and so the Torah. So who would like to read it? All right, Marlene.
And so the Torah commands us, do not harden your heart and do not close your hand to the needy. If your heart hardens, your hand will close, and you will see that your fingers are of equal length. And then you will say to him, the poor person, go out and work like me. But do the opposite. Open your hand, and then you will see that your fingers are short and tall. And this is how God created people, big and small, and this lives from that.
Thank you. So could everyone just like do that? Like close your hand up, and like, it's an experiential education text, but if like, I sort of love this text. Like if you close your hand and you just looked at your fingers, like they do all look the same. And like, there's no sort of like, one of you was just saying about like, there's no backstory. You don't know why somebody is wherever they are in, the march towards the finish line in life. And like and so it looks like everyone has sort of the same access to everything. And when you open your hand, you get more context. And when you're being more generous, you're able to like look at what's the story. Oh, one of the fingers is longer. Oh, further path to travel. Oh, some of the people who your parents were encountering in, the jewelry business, the law field, like. So I don't know, I guess any reactions to that text? Marlene.
I don't think we ever really know what's going on in somebody's mind or somebody's life. Like in that story with the rabbis going to the bath that you mentioned, who knows? He could have been saving for health treatment for himself or for somebody else, in the family. He could have been trying to save for, for his progeny. We just don't know. And so it's kind of presumptuous of us to make assumptions. And if you take that one step further, dare I say, it's kind of presumptuous to think that we will be in a position always to give or to second guess other people. So it kind of places us in it could place one in a holier than thou position, which is not a good place for anybody to be. So we should all like think about, when we make assumptions and step back and say, maybe we don't know what's going on. We just have to, take it at face value.
Thank you. Any other reactions?
I do notice that they say, do not harden your heart, do not close your hand, but he doesn't say anything about your mind. And while the donation comes from your heart because you care about other people, at the same time, I'm not saying you would be duped because we really don't know everybody's story, but I love to donate my time. I donate money, I donate things, but I'm careful about where I donate it because I want to make sure that it's trustworthy, that it's not going into a black hole, it's not going to a garbage can, it's not going to someone's drug habit. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that it said, don't harden your heart and don't close your hand, but it didn't incorporate any thought into it.
Yeah. Although when the Torah did not say that, you're right. But when in the I like to think of this as like the structural justice, comment, right? I don't know that Rabbi Loom actually was thinking about structural justice, but I think like thinking about, you do use your mind to think about where did someone start out, where are they headed, what benefits did they have access to? Yeah, Anita.
You need to unmute it, Anita.
I think about riding on the New York City subway system. And I've offered, before COVID, I've offered food and they've turned me down. And it says not to give beggars. So I think about that all the time. Because I've been turned down.
I hear you. So there are other texts in here that talk about like, I mean, this is not precisely your case, but it's adjacent. Like, what if you encounter somebody and you have no money? It's Shabbat, you're out, you have no money, or you're poor, you have no money, whatever it is, you're out, you have no resources to give somebody and somebody asks you for something. And so the texts talk a lot about like, well, offer a blessing, like everybody could offer a blessing. So like, I wonder what it would be like. And it usually, these moments happen like very quickly. You're maybe feeling anxious, they're feeling anxious. Well, they may be, but you definitely are. And like what would happen if like, oh, here's a banana, oh, you don't want it? Oh, I offer you a blessing for a wonderful day. I like just like the idea of offering blessings as a way of being is, I think, sort of interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Marion.
I just find it very difficult. I think it says when they use the word parnasa that you're supposed to first make sure that you don't give everything you have away, that you have to worry about yourself first. But I do find it very difficult because if you live on a limited income and you're being pulled in every direction to go to every cause. I mean, I give a lot of my time, but I can't always give my money. And so I feel that what I do as a volunteer doesn't always mean money. It means time and being with people and trying my best. But I find it very difficult, Rabbi, when you're being pulled in so many. I mean, we're told to give tzedakah, but where does it stop and where does it start? Like, we've got indigenous people, we have Black people, we've got poor people, homeless people, we can give clothes, but I mean, how much can one person do, in their lifetime? You can only do so much.
Yes.
In the readings, I glanced through them. The part that Marion is talking about is the loving kindness. I mean, isn't that a form of the tzedakah? I mean, exactly what she was saying. I also do a lot of volunteer work, but I think that's given the hesed or the loving kindness. How does that interact with the tzedakah? Isn't that a form of it? It doesn't have to just be the monetary, dollars and cents, but giving of yourself, I think is very meaningful, especially if, means a lot.
It does, yes.
I read that comment tonight on the chat was think before you speak. So I thought, oh my God, she must be talking to me. but the loving kindness that was a lot in the readings tonight, that aspect of it.
Yeah. So if you look at page 7, I have a root cause tree, which I just it's a social work tool, and it's a way of thinking about like, if you're helping somebody, like, where are you on that tree? And it's probably very familiar to some of you and maybe new to others of you, but it's just the idea of thinking about like, as you're taking on a project, helping, like visiting somebody or giving money or making food or whatever, like where on that tree are you? And so if you look on page 6, it sort of has it defines the fruit of the tree as the impacts of the problems that you see in the community. A hungry person, right, asking for money on the subway. And then the trunk of the tree is the structures and practices and policies that make this problem actually a problem on a big scale. And then below it is the roots, like what are the underlying historical, social, political, or economic root causes of these problems? Why do these policies and structures exist? And I think it's good to constantly be asking yourself, like, where am I operating on the tree, right? And it could be through time or money that one is making an impact on the tree. And I actually think that like most of us are hardwired in one way or the other. Like some people like really, really, really love to do acts of loving kindness and really, really, really are not that into like sort of root cause work, either because it's less with the actual person being served or because it's sometimes confrontational and that's scary, or like most of us have an area in which we feel more comfortable operating. And I would encourage you to think about like doing the majority of the work that of the volunteerism and justice work that you do in whichever zone you're most comfortable, but like find a way to act in a different zone. So if you're like on the leaf and fruit sort of area, and like the person right in front of you area, that's where you feel most comfortable, like challenge yourself to like be curious, like, well, why are they hungry? And like, if I didn't come by tomorrow with the sandwich, what would happen? And are there like policies that are making this like an ongoing problem? Is there a way to do any root cause work, even if it's primarily sort of doing some changing of thinking? So I'll say today in my organizing class, one of the rabbis who has been leading it with me, who used to be my student, said, I had this idea that came out of this class. Somebody got on the call and introduced themselves and included which indigenous people's land they were on. And there was sort of a whole discussion about where did that come from? And is there any Jewish way to talk about it? And she said, I feel like I hear some people start talking about Israel in the middle of talking about what the land means. And I feel like that's not the right framing. I think my outcome of this class is I want to make a sample of like Jewish framing that feels sort of right about how a synagogue might indicate, on whose land they sit. And then it would be sort of, every shul doesn't have to make it up for themselves. It would be a standard sort of well thought out, checked with a lot of different perspectives way. And then like we could offer it from USCJ, like every shul, if they wanted to, could adopt this on their website. And like, it's not that hard. Sometimes you just need the right person who's in charge of the website. So anyway, like in lots of ways, I think that's root cause work. It didn't cost money, but it's like a way of changing, at least it's trunk work, right? It's talking about a policy of putting it on your website, but it's also starting to get at some of the sort of underlying historical reasons that we wouldn't have known to call the land we're on by any indigenous people's name before, and that people are starting. So anyway, does anyone want to give an example of something that you do that is service or justice work and like where you think it fits on that tree now that we're talking about the tree?
Are you referring to service to the community?
Yeah, to anybody who's not you,
For example, my sisterhood, I'm very proud of, we do shared meals, and once a month we cook for those who are food insecure. And during the pandemic, we have to drop the food off to a drop-off place. But in non-pandemic times, we partner with the Presbyterian church that's across from our synagogue, and we feed up to 60 people once a month. And the houses of worship where my synagogue is, they each take turns every day of the week. So it covers the entire month. So we're the second Thursday of every month, and we have more volunteers than we could, be thankful for.
Thank you. And so where on the tree would you put that?
Oh, good question. I have to look at the tree again. Hold on. I think that I would put it at the root of the tree because the root is the strongest part of the tree.
Huh. Well, but what you're doing, so the act is you're all getting together and you're cooking meals together, right? For people who are hungry.
Right. Well, we're cooking meals in our.
And then you're bringing it to hungry people.
Right.
So the root is very strong, but I would say that I actually think it's the leaves and the fruit.
Okay.
Because that's the direct service, right? Like if you don't show up next month to bring the fruit, like there's no policy that changed in order to make it. Now you could say by establishing a precedent of our sisterhood does this, that is a way of making it more the trunk, because it's not just I decided to cook a meal and bring it to a person, but in fact, I have all these women and we're all cooking. And actually we teamed up with the church. And so there's more meals and it's regular. And so maybe it's really in the trunk. But could anybody imagine a way that Sandy and her team could sort of add on to this and add something that was related to policy? Like if they wanted to sort of think like, how are we going to make sure that like in 10 years, nobody needs our meals anymore? Like, what could they add on to what they're doing?
They could work with grocery stores or restaurants and set up a plan, a program where they donate leftover food or they have it available to people, so that you would be changing the policies of institutions who have the power to provide this, or maybe they would give these people jobs.
We do
who need work.
We do take food from that's donated from the supermarkets and the other chain restaurants.
Oh, sorry, you said you do that? Yeah, it's wonderful. I was just trying to go down the tree a little bit. So it's super generous that you all do that. That if the places that are involved in actually helping to feed people who need meals would also offer them jobs or job training or something like that, so that they can work toward getting on their feet, so that they don't always need food from other people.
Marlene?
Well, I suppose that the shul and or the sisterhood could build this into their policies and procedures if they couldn't do it into their bylaws and their constitutions, to make sure it was a repeatable procedure or process for the future. To piggyback on what Sandy said, our sisterhood has been doing, and a great deal of our leadership became sisterhood leadership because of their work with our community's interfaith hospitality network, IHN, where 3 or 4 times a year, our synagogue, but there's about 20 some odd houses of worship, churches, mosques, and synagogue that host for a week at a time. This is all pre-pandemic, homeless families. And we host them in our Hebrew school classrooms. And Sisterhood had been cooking meals and doing activities because apparently, at least in a needs assessment in our community, there were a lot of efforts being made for individuals, traditionally men, who were homeless, but not so much for the families, whether that was the women and the child or the men and women and the child. And this came about through Interfaith Network and Collaborative, and they realized that no one institution had the overall means and ability and all the resources to host people for a month or for all year round. So it's divided up with buses. They stay at a shelter and a training house downtown during the day, and late afternoon they come for dinner, and then they pack their lunch for the next day, and they have activities and social action and learning and schmoozing and exercise outside on the gym, the playground and whatever. And then we get everybody up early. For those of us who sleep over as overnight hosts, we sleep over and serve breakfast make sure they have their lunch and their medicines, and then go on the bus for the day. So this is so much bigger than our synagogue, our shul, our affiliate, or our synagogue. It took the effort of a larger community. And as far as the roots go, the underlying problem is poverty. Is poverty. You lose your home. So I would like to believe that in addition to providing fruits and leaves, that by having this going on in its 12th year and always looking on, we obviously provided money for food and hotel during the pandemic because we weren't allowed to provide the in-person care. So I'm hoping that the very existence and continuance in double-digit years is a way of institutionalizing a solution rather than the problem on a small level.
I want to share.
May I say something? I've been putting my hand up
I'm
for
sorry.
a long time, and I've been ignored all the time.
Well, I didn't mean to ignore you, but I'm really happy you jumped in. All right, Corinne.
It's not only about giving money. Well, first of all, our synagogue also pairs with other synagogues, and we do the Out of the Cold, and homeless people come, and it's very surprising. It was for me, in fact, the first time, how many women and young women come to this thing. And through UJA, which has launched a big campaign in Canada at the moment, there are women who are living in shelters, who have nothing. And as I said, they have no husbands and they're scared to go anywhere. And they're in women's shelters. And we've been donating sanitary products because they don't even have the money to buy them. So, I mean, I went to Costco and bought, tons and tons, and we all did a whole, and there's this whole push for donating this. So it's not always only money that you can give. There are lots of people who need many other things. And I think that what comes out of all of this, for me personally, is we give to help. But there's nothing more gratifying to yourself as when you give. It's a God thing. It makes you feel good. And I think that that's a lot what it's all about.
Thank you. I want to just offer 2 articles that I think are interesting. And they're not at all they're just compliments to what was said already. One is called When Charity Chokes Justice. And it's a little bit provocative, but worth checking out. And I can send you the link, Julia, after this. But it's by a man who is a doctor, David Hilfiger, who's Christian. And part of how he understands his sort of Christian responsibility is to give charity in a very significant way. And the way his family did it is they built their house into a part is a private home where their family lives, and part is a 12 or 13 bed men's shelter in Washington, D.C. Do any of you live in Washington, D.C. and know Joseph's house? No. So it's a 12 or 13 bed shelter for men who are homeless. And he talks about realizing that the kind of reputation this place got was as if they were solving all homelessness in the city. And he talked about the conflict, I feel as a Christian that I have to do acts of loving kindness, for instance. I have to give charity. This is the way we're doing it. And somehow everybody acts like we've solved poverty with this 13 bed shelter. And are we doing more harm was his question. And it's just important to sit with, right? And figure out how, are there any ramifications for what we're doing, or are we giving an impression? There's a book called Sweet Charity also, where she sort of talks about the pressure of the system when it's not working, and that when you let just enough steam out, it's sort of people think it's not really a problem and we don't address it. So I'm offering it simply as a way of sort of looking at the ways in which you're acting and seeing is there any downside to it? The other is there's a book called, what's it called? Forces for Good. And it has a chapter in it. You don't have to read it. I'm going to tell you the highlight, but it's called Advocate and Serve. And they make the point, they did a study of a whole bunch of nonprofits, and they were trying to figure out like which are the most effective ones. And they said, you know, you might think you should specialize. Either you should do advocacy or you should do service, but you should become really good at the one that you're doing, and that's it. And they said, actually, the most effective ones are the ones that do both. And the reason is, like, if you're doing service all the time, you know all the ways the system is broken. But if you don't have an advocacy arm, like, you don't have any way to actually change laws and policies. But if you're only doing advocacy, then you kind of might lose touch with the people who you're trying to advocate for. And then you might be advocating for something that's no longer like actually what they need. But if you're doing service and advocacy in the same place, then you become very knowledgeable about where the system's broken, and then you have a mechanism for addressing it. So I offer it as like when you are like the places where you're acting and giving, and it sounds like you're doing a lot of it, like, are you sort of looking at them and asking like, oh, is there any way this place that is doing a lot of amazing service like could also advocate? Is there any way that this place that's advocating could also do service to sort of be more in the mix? Are any of you involved with organizations or places that it feels like do both of those well in conjunction with each other?
I wanted to say something. I don't know if you saw my hand was up. It's not me personally, although I am a member of an incredible synagogue where we before COVID, we would go monthly to cook and feed the homeless in a homeless institution I'll tell you about in a moment. And then also all kinds of things like interfaith mitzvah day and things like that. And we would have like the Muslim community over to our synagogue, and our cantor would explain everything, some things about Judaism, and then there would be an event at their religious institution. But what I wanted to tell you about is there were 3 women at another temple actually here in Houston, and they procured the funds and founded a homeless institution. And what they do and used to do, it's changed, it's morphed into some other things and combined with other ones here, but they did everything, and they didn't really have people live there. There was a day center where people could sleep there, you know, but they fed them, they found them jobs, they found them housing, they gave them physical and mental help as far as services, doctors, dentists, mental health, like I said, all kinds of services, all kinds of volunteers. You know, we've done a lot for them, donating time and things and money, obviously, but especially when you go there monthly, it was pretty amazing to see people, because you realize they're just like you know, and some of them are even well dressed. They're probably recently homeless or whatever, but they were homeless, you know, and they're there with their toddlers or whatever. And some have been in the sun a long time. You've seen, you know, you realize they've been in the outside a long time. But anyway, it's amazing what these 3 people did. And to me, that's the fruit of the tree. No, excuse me, that's the trunk of the tree. It's not the bottom and it's not the top. But it's pretty amazing what these people did, and it just took an idea, and it is this amazing place.
Thank you. All right, Jerry Lynn.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
What do you all mean by social justice exactly?
Okay.
Why, is that hard?
No, well, it's not hard. It is I'll tell you what I mean. And I would say I mean access in any way, economically, but also socially, like just like equal access to opportunity, regardless of any differences in society, equal access and rights. What are you worried I might mean? Or is it just like such a weird term that it feels like, what the heck are you talking about? And why do you keep saying that instead of like just justice?
I have a whole lot of things on my mind, and we don't have enough time, but I'm going to contact you. Okay?
Okay.
Because of what I'm hearing. Okay, so I'm like, within the Jewish community, what do we consider social justice? I'm listening, I hear wonderful programs, but what are we teaching? What are you all teaching in terms of the whole whole social justice and the various avenues to look at to kind of concentrate, as you say, whether you're doing service, advocacy, community organizing. There's so many things that you could do under the umbrella of social justice. And I'm just wondering, other than, I thought that was my dad, he's 91, if he calls me, I go. But I was just wondering, I hear a lot about food and the hungry, and they're wonderful. Please don't anybody think I'm saying don't do any of these programs. That's not what I'm saying. But are we teaching people in terms of really advocating for talking to your legislative people, really being in touch out there? It used to be that you would give a lot of homeless food, leftover food. But now we have so many resources that we need to be able to tap into to get fresh food for families, teaching people how to grow gardens, putting gardens in communities to help them, coming up with alternative ways of dealing with some things, and going out there and doing the work. I believe that you've got your time, your talent, whatever it is, and your money. And they could be used in various ways. So that's always like, what do we mean by social justice in this framework? So thank you for answering that.
Well, but I would say people mean different things. And at the moment, I have been feeling like the place where I could make the most impact is to say, like, we've got great schools, but they're not so diverse, most of them. And like, we could be doing more out in the world if they were more diverse around gender stuff, around race, around class, like everything. So I've used organizing training as my tool for trying to make change in the world. But I think like people only do things for a long time that they get some benefit and nourishment from and that they like to, and that are not like every minute the biggest challenge ever. So in organizing, I like to think like I do a lot of one-to-ones, and I want to know like, who are you and what do you want to be in the world, and what keeps you up at night, and how would you want to make change? And then I look for people who have enough of a shared vision of the world as I have to work together. I think Jewish tradition implores us to act and to both take care of the people who are in our immediate sphere and in concentric circles out. And like, I think the world that we inhabit now that has so many technological opportunities, it's like, if you know about something, are you responsible to act? The text I wanted to look at next on page 13 is all about like, if you can protest against something and you don't, like it's as if you did it, which is like very heavy. I see you, Marlene. I'll call you on you in 1 second. But I love that one, right? Like anyone who's able to protest against the transgressions of someone in their house and doesn't do, they're punished as if they did it. And there is another sort of companion text that I just want to say to you because it sort of makes me chuckle all the time. It's on page 28, and it's about, it's a Mishnah from Shabbat, and it says, it's at the bottom of page 28, a cow doesn't go out, like can't go out on Shabbat, like it would be breaking Shabbat if it went out in a particular way, sort of tied up with a strap on its horns. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah's cow would go out with the strap between his horns against the will of the sages. And then the Talmud asks, like that was the story in the Mishnah, and then the Talmud wants to like talk about this. So it says, did he only have one cow? And the answer is, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would tithe 12,000 lambs each and every year. It was taught the cow was not his, rather it was his neighbor's. Since he didn't protest her allowing the cow to go out that way, it was named after him. So he observed somebody else doing something that was a transgression. And so now that problem became known by his name. And I love it. I love like the thought exercise of like, what today, if it were known by my name, would make me crazy because I couldn't abide by it, and would I act more? So like when you think about not getting involved in something, I like to do the thought exercise of like, well, what if it was named for me? Like that climate change, that's Stephanie Ruske climate change, like what am I doing? But that was sort of sweet story, I think, about the idea of protesting. All right, Marlene, we're back to you.
Thanks. I wanted to build on what Geraldine had said earlier. I believe, and Geraldine, please correct me, you said something about people or women were giving our time, our talent, and our treasure. Well, perhaps the other thing that we could give is the teaching, which is a T, in terms of the whole idea of teaching people. I mean, I'm thinking of the article you told me, when charity chokes justice. People want to give and have instant gratification, and I mean, if you're hungry or you're out in the cold, those are immediate, Maslowian needs. But if you teach somebody how to cook or to garden or, to eat more healthfully, it's to strive for self-sufficiency. So perhaps the teaching is something that is another T that we could all work on for a longer term systemic solution, like you said, the gardens and the eating and the co-ops and the vegetables and other things like that. And I guess this little cute anecdote that you gave is kind of like, if you're not part of the solution, I guess you're part of the problem, and to refer back to the AIDS crisis, HIV, I lived in New York in the 80s, and it's like silence equals death. You can't say because it's not my problem, then I don't care, or you're going to turn a blind eye, heart, hand, and mind and wallet to it. So I think it's really about, paying attention, speaking up, and doing something.
Thank you.
Just by an aside, I put the teaching under the talent. Only because sometimes you have to go out and do your research. I did this for one project in Catonsville. Where do we really need to help families? What area? So I went and did the research and found out very specifically it was an area in which we could go in that area. We got the supermarkets and other different food places to donate for us, to us, and we were able to support in that area, just to inundate that area at the time that those services were much needed. This was through another organization. So we can teach them, we can learn, we can go and take our talents that we have. There are so many talented people that I've run across, and I see several of you on this page, that you have so much to offer, just with what you know to help other people and to guide them so that they can be. I can't go out there running around picking up boxes anymore. I'm just not going to do that. But I can tell you how to do it and where to go.
Okay, Denise, and then I want to talk about one more text briefly.
I have to say, I recently converted to Judaism, but before I did that, I did a lot of studying and reading. And one of the biggest things that drew me to Judaism was the idea that we are tasked to help people and to make the world a better place. Tikkun olam. I thought that was wonderful. And then the more I studied and the more I learned, I realized how much it really is just an integral part of Judaism. This is what I've discovered. So once I don't know if I had to, but after I converted, I started working with Jewish Family Services, and they had all kinds of programs that I could do to give of myself, because I just feel like that's something that I really want to do. So I understand that we have to always be aware of it, but I'm coming at this like thinking, wow, this is great. This religion really puts its money where its mouth is, and that's one of the biggest things that drew me to it.
Thank you. I want to call your attention to page 23. There's a text at source 46 is at the bottom. And it's from a Musar text, which Musar texts they focus on sort of like refining your soul. It's like spiritual development. So they asked it's called the Orchot Tzadikim. And he asked this question, like, if you had 1,000 gold pieces to give away, what's the best way to do it? Like, should you give it one at a time to all the different people that you encounter on the street, or should you give it in one like felt swoop, one place? And he comes to the conclusion, he uses a proof text to say, like, actually, you shouldn't give it in one big sort of big generous act and then that's it. You should give one a day. But if you like, and the reason he says that is because it's not about solving the problem. If it was about solving the problem, you might take your 1,000 gold pieces and put them all towards one problem and like make a dent on it. But if it's like, here's one piece, it's like everybody has just a teeny bit, but it's not. This particular text is focusing on the giver, right? And it's about making yourself generous. And by accustoming yourself to acting generously regularly, that you build the sort of custom of being a person who's always giving, rather than giving some big gigantic gift and then like you never give again. So, I mean, the texts in here and in our tradition really are really varied, right? Some of them, there's another text in here that I like to call like, you know, the doorman text, but it's a piece of Gemara about a bunch of people who are living together in a courtyard. And they're all contributing to this guardhouse in order to be safe. And they do, and Elijah, the prophet, sort of comes by and he sees them, and one day he stops talking to them. And so the idea is like, well, they must have done something wrong. Like, why is he not talking to them? And so the rabbis are like tearing their hair out in the Gemara, trying to figure out like, what's wrong with this guardhouse? Why would Elijah stop talking to them? And they come to the conclusion that it's because they had locked it and they made it in a way that people couldn't come in. Like, it was okay to make yourself safe and to have a guardhouse, and wild animals can't come in, and like you're protecting yourself, but somebody who's hungry has to be able to present themselves to you and ask for food. And by locking it, they had made it impossible to get in. And so, I mean, I live in New York City. I think about the ways in which it's possible to sort of guard yourself from other people being able to tell you what they need. And all of us, no matter where you live, there are ways that one could do it and never see somebody who makes you uncomfortable because they are asking you for something that you don't want to give. And so this is a text that's saying like, that's not okay. Like, Elijah the prophet's going to stop talking to you if you act that way, because that's not how we act. But our texts are really filled with things that talk about this things that talk about the system and how you construct your system, how you take care of people closest to you and further out, what percentage of your income you give to other people, what's like too much also, because the idea is not to make it so that you have nothing. How you balance wanting to make Shabbat and holidays nice and also taking care of people who have less than you, because you could make the most glorious Shabbat celebration and also then not have tzedakah to give. So, and we also have a musar impulse around not only thinking about the outcome and how we structure society, but also thinking about what it does to us and how we open up our own hearts and pay attention to the length of everybody else's fingers, you know, and don't harden our hearts. So there's no one way. Like, if someone says like, what does Judaism think about justice and service? Like, yes, you should do it. Everybody makes their own sort of determinations about where they're going to act and in what amounts. But regular commitments, both close to home and also sort of when you know about something and thinking like, when am I obligated to protest, you know, and when am I bordering on an issue that could be known by my name? That would be devastating. There's lots here. So I would say, first of all, I welcome you to keep looking at the source sheets after tonight, and I'm happy to meet with anybody who wants to meet with me. And I'm happy to have any of you take the organizing class. I'll send Julia the link. But it's a chance to sort of think about like, how do you go from having an impulse to do something good in the world to working with other people so that you're not doing it alone and you can achieve something that none of you could do on your own. So really, really, really nice to be with you all tonight. Thank you for having me. Mazal tov on your upcoming bat mitzvahs. Just thank you. And happy Hanukkah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. That was really wonderful. I have to say, I would be remiss if I did not mention that Giving Tuesday is coming up the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And both Women's League and Torah Fund are part of Giving Tuesday. Donations to Women's League will go to the Masorti Days of Study in Israel, which we can all join in because they will be virtual. The donations to Torah Fund will be going to the Spaces campaign, which is the sort of special project along with the regular Torah Fund campaign. So I wanted to mention that. Our next class is going to be December 9th. We're going to be talking about mitzvot, and there is reading for that, which is the introduction in the It's a Mitzvah book. So very apropos of the topic. So it's pages 2 to 31 in It's a Mitzvah. And I will send that out as usual the week of the class, but if you want to get a head start on that. And we will end with our Debbie Friedman. So let me put that on.
Can you repeat the pages, please?
2 to 31. It's the introduction in It's a Mitzvah.
I just have to tell you that when we end with this every week, I quickly have to take my dog out for a walk. And I swear I'm singing this when I'm walking my dog. It just stays with me for like most of the night. It's really beautiful.
All right, here we go.
We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. And for those who study Torah here and everywhere, may they be blessed with all they need, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Shabbat Shalom. Happy
Shabbat
Hanukkah.
Shalom.
Oh, and just to share, if any of you participated in the Gary Rosenthal,
I couldn't do it.
Door Mitzvah project.
so I got mine in the mail today, and he's local here, so yours should all be coming too. And it'll be fun to light together with women.